Sup Shredders! My name is Logan, aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SV Patrons video today that I'm making for Dinnerhe as part of their custom monthly music review. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track from an act named Billie Eilish off of their 2016, or should I say this 2016 release. I'm not quite sure which album it's off. Apparently it's in the Don't Smile at Me EP, so that's cool. We're going to listen through this track from start to finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's do it. What do we got? Oh, some really sweet vocal harmonies immediately.
I've been watching you for some time. Can't stop staring at those ocean eyes. Burning cities and napalm skies. 15 flares inside those ocean eyes. Your ocean eyes on fire.
It's nice how the vocals feel around the stereo field. Sound design with those background synths.
He left her lonely with a diamond mine and those ocean eyes on fire. You really know how to make me cry when you give me those ocean eyes. I'm scared.
It's a very different experience listening to it through headphones, so if you haven't done so, I'd recommend that you do. You might get a new appreciation for it.
You really know how to make me cry when you give me those ocean eyes. I'm scared. I've never fallen quite this high, falling into your ocean eyes. Those ocean eyes.
Yeah, this is a fantastic song. Apparently, according to Dinnerhe, I've been told that apparently they think this is their first hit song at the age of 14. So Billie Eilish released this at the age of 14, or made it at age 14, if I'm not mistaken, which is incredible. We're gonna talk about this more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Billie Eilish titled Ocean Eyes. In this section, I'm going to provide an overall song analysis of everything from lyrics and vocals all the way through to studio production, as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. But before we go any further, what do we think this track is about? I think this is about Billie Eilish falling in love with someone not just for one particular element of them, like their eyes, you know, like getting lost in the depth of those, as well as their diamond mind, you know. It's just you've got all these things that are mentioned within the lyrics, such as, you know, burning cities and napalm skies, 15 flares inside those ocean eyes, your ocean eyes. It's just such a an interesting environment there. It's contrast to the burning cities and napalm skies, 15 flares inside those ocean eyes. It's almost like it's guiding you into those. And Billie Eilish talks about, you know, they've never fallen from quite this high, falling into your ocean eyes. They've never fallen as much in love as they are with this person, and it's something they're scared about. And I think that makes sense. I think this will be something people can relate to. Careful creature made friends with time, he left her lonely with a diamond mine. It's interesting because on the one hand you could say that a diamond is innately beautiful and something that's incredibly precious, but at the same time it's so hard, you know. It's such a brutally kind of like unforgiving element in terms of how hard it is, if that makes sense. So it's just a kind of a multifaceted approach to the subject matter that I really appreciate, and it shows a sense of maturity on Billie's part. So yeah, when they say no fear, it's like, I know how dangerous this is for me, but like I just can't help myself around you. And I do dig that. Alternatively, it could be someone who is so deep in themselves that they can't get out, and that's where the flares are coming from. I'm not sure. It's a complicated piece. I'll need more time to think about it. But I think that Billie Eilish sings really neatly here, tells the story quite effectively, very comfortable in the hidden chest voice. A lot of it is upper range there, occasionally going down into the lower breath, but ultimately very kind of nice and airy the entire time, as in like it kind of floats around the piece. Part of that is EQing a lot of the production work done by Phineas. I think Phineas, her brother, if I'm not mistaken, did the production on this, which is pretty fantastic as well. There's a lot of interesting delay and effects chains and stuff like that, reverb tails on her voice to make it seem a bit more sort of atmospheric and misty sounding, almost like it's inside her head or inside the person's head that she's talking to. We have a lot of different tails and end lines and melodies, and things dance over top of each other, and it's quite a complicated arrangement in terms of the vocal takes there, with not just storytelling devices but actual like sung melodies, and there's some reverse takes as well near the end there, which are kind of interesting, with the da-da-da-da kind of sung over the top, almost like she's going back through her mind in a day in the life of just trying to figure out where things happened, you know, where things went wrong, I suppose. Or it's just, yeah, there's probably too much to go into in a way that won't just be another 5 minutes to be discussing all the various intricacies of it, but it's safe to say that I understand why Billie Eilish had such success with this track there. It shows a proficiency that's beyond her years, and I'm very happy I've had the chance to check it out with an active listen, like a concentrated one. The track itself at 3 minutes 20 is well fleshed out with a variety of different chorus and verse lines there. It's relatively simple and straightforward, and it fits right within that 2 to 4 minute sweet spot, and I think that's part of why it works so well, is if you had a piece where we tried to do too many things instrumentally in a way that was complicated, it might be detrimental into the listening experience, partially because it distracts from what Billie Eilish is doing. What I love about it is what we're trying to sort of do with more of a sound design perspective, as opposed to like a literal, you have the instruments on the left and right in the center kind of thing. There's some tippy taps and things moving backwards and forwards in the background of the piece there, almost like a pendulum swinging back and forth. It's very interesting. It's like it gets, and there's some sort of glitchy elements in the background as well that come in a way that's like absolutely unexpected, and you're just sort of mystified by what's going on there, almost like the track is trying to help you understand what it's going through or what it's experiencing. We go back to the start, not to go through it in chronological order literally, because I know you just heard the track, but it's just worth noting how things are staircased to a certain extent in a way that's not really too literal on that front. What I dig about it is that we have just the vocals with these lush harmonies immediately, highlighting the chord progression that we're going to have throughout quite a lot of this track and instantiating it in a way which makes it familiar, and it immediately shifts the focus to both Billie Eilish as the main sort of protagonist within the piece, as well as her being the focal point and her ability to sing. You have pads in the background which have this sort of glow and sort of chorus to them to make them sound a bit more sort of magical and sort of like melancholic, I suppose. The percussion with the kicks and the clicks is quite sharp, and I think that's meant to sort of pierce through things. We discussed the Napalm Skies around that point, and it sounds to me like we're trying to emphasize the contrast to those harsher elements with the smoothness of everything else. The juxtaposition between those two elements there, I suppose. I think that what is quite cool about this with the bass is just how neatly it fits into the low end and doesn't try to be too abrasive, or it's kind of innocuous, eh? And then when you, again, and then as I mentioned, you have those things going backwards and forwards in the stereo field, those dup, 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 dup. And it's just like, you have to question why it is that that's happening, aside from just interest and not necessarily knowing how to build it further. But it's done in a way where, like, if you're listening through speakers or you're listening through headphones, you're having two entirely different experiences. And I have to again hand it to the people involved in producing this to be able to have that duality occur in a way where both are satisfying, and it kind of shifts this. And alongside some rises, such as around the 2-minute 20 mark and stuff like that, you just have these tippy taps incorporating a different rhythm there, with these quarters and eighths for a lot of it, but then they bring in the kind of 16th set to switch things up. So I think that's more the purpose, in addition to kind of giving you something else to follow along to as you hear parts that are repeated vocally there. I think one of the most tender pieces of the track is at the end when it's just Billie and the piano. I think that was just a very smart move. It's far more minimalist in the way that the harmonies are presented there, and it's delicate. And where there might have been temptation to find, added something else at the end to build it up just a little bit more, it's a brave and sensible move simultaneously to have Billie just be by themselves with the keys there and that solo element there. It lets you know that they're alone there. It's almost like this track was Billie working out this situation at the end. They kind of give into it, I suppose. In general, though, I think this track is quite well produced and quite well performed there. There's a obvious chemistry between the elements in terms of the mood that they're trying to emphasize there, the differing nuanced sophistication of emotions that is not something that I expect from a 14-year-old, to be honest. And I appreciate, again, the vivid imagery of the burning cities and napalm skies. It's just so intense and antithetical to the softness and sweetness of a lot of what we're hearing at that point, aside from the glitchy parts that illustrate something else and the sharpness of the percussion, I suppose. But as mine are key oriented there, which makes sense thematically, because this isn't really a happy situation for them to be in. It's kind of complicated, I suppose, and it's better to go with a minor key in that situation to show that edge to it, as opposed to making it more major key so that someone thinks that it's going to resolve itself at the end when it doesn't necessarily do that. I think that a lot of the variation within the chord progressions and overall melodies and harmonies and stuff like that is through the vocals again. They do enough to develop and keep things fresh throughout. Studio recording, mixing and mastering as well is fantastic. I do like the fact that each of the ingredients we had within this track had its position within the stereo fields, left side right to the headphones or speakers, as well as in the frequency spectrum. Things were well niche and EQ'd. There was automation of the panning of some of the elements there, going backwards and rights there, and I like that it was unpredictable there until it wasn't, and then it was pleasant because we needed that sort of compositional diversity at that point. Nice and loud, but there's dynamic range to it from both the compositional production perspective. Bus compression and limiting is handled. And just to comment on the vocal production, even though I mentioned there are clearly some sort of like vocal processes and effects going on there, it's also clear that Billie Eilish can just sing at this point. They don't need to have their performance fixed in post or anything like that. They layer themselves really neatly within their range there, and there's never a moment where you doubt their capacity. There's some sort of quiet vibrato there, and I like the tone and texture and how that's presented. Commercial grade. So ultimately, very happy with that. Honest, no applicable constructive critique. It was great. And just from a final generalist perspective, I think, again, just to emphasize, this is exactly why it's so important to try and listen to these tracks that you like, both with an active listen where you're fully sort of concentrated on it, as well as through headphones if you haven't done that. Want semi-decent ones where you can kind of hear the experience that you're supposed to have with it more accurately. I just think sometimes, especially with songs that are more popular, a lot of the exposure will get to an amount that we almost become, like we don't want to hear more of them afterwards. Songs get overplayed. And I think that can remove the joy that can come, the pleasure that can come from hearing something the same way that the mixing and mastering engineer did. I'm just really pleased to have gotten the chance to review this. Thanks again to Dinnerhe for the request. And thank you for watching my review of this track from an act named Billie Eilish, titled Ocean Eyes, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show us some love via their various social medias and their Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I will catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.